Welcome to AIW Empower. This is a space where we talk honestly about careers, not just what they look like from the outside, but what they actually feel like to live inside of them. These interviews are designed to help you understand your options, avoid unnecessary surprises, and feel less alone as you navigate your own paths. Today, I'm joined by Kirsten Matthews, who also goes by Kay, and who works in the personal care and services field. We'll be talking about her career, the choices that shaped it, and some of the realities people don't talk about enough. Kate, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Lynn. I'm very excited to talk about this. I always loved career fairs as a kid, so now I'm like, oh, I'm viewing this like a virtual career fair, except I'm on the other side of the booth.
Oh, I love that. You get to see both sides.
Hmm.
So let's start off. Can you tell us what it is that you do?
Yeah, so the easiest thing online for people to understand is I am a virtual dog trainer and behavior consultant. I'm sure we'll get into some concrete examples in the further questions, but there is a difference between being a dog trainer and being a behavior consultant, and I am both of them. A lot of people think that if you're a dog trainer, you're also able to work with behavior. And that just is not the case. A lot of times you have to get some additional experience and education. If you're going through certifying bodies, they're actually different certifications. It is a whole process. And the easiest way I could explain it is something like if you're going to, say, a pet store and doing a puppy class, that person is usually a dog trainer or them coming into your home teaching different things. Awesome. If you're calling someone because your dog cannot be left home alone without freaking out, if your dog has bitten anyone before, if your dog is, reactive, barking at dogs and people, a lot of times you're looking for a behavior consultant, depending on what the root cause of the problem is.
Well, that's interesting. It's honestly something I didn't know about. I think a lot of us just kind of assume that it's an all-in-one package, and so going to different people for different things that are seem so related to us, are things that we just assume, I think. So, okay, looking forward to hearing more about that. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Um, so let's start off a little bit more about the industry as well. How would you describe your work to someone who's never heard of this role or industry? And I'm gonna put the challenge out there, one or two sentences, if someone was just like, give me the Coles notes.
Okay, yeah. So a dog trainer is somebody that helps people live life with their dogs, normally through teaching them new skills.
That's interesting, 'cause people would not assume that it's about the people.
Yeah, both people and dogs, they both need to different skills, obviously, but essentially what a dog trainer is a teacher. It's somebody that educates or helps someone do something. I kind of joke that I'm like, a teacher, a tutor, and a coach thrown into one. If you think of like kids sports, you have like your basketball coach, you have a teacher that teaches them, you have private tutors that maybe if you're struggling behind, and a dog trainer uh, does all of these things and they're verbs, right? And you have to pick up and put down the different hats to be able to help each individual client with whatever it is that they're needing.
Okay. All right, well, I can't wait to hear more about that. But we'll go back to that because I want to start at the beginning. Can you tell us where your career started and if this was always the path that you thought that you would take in life?
Oh, no, not at all. So as concise as possible. I grew up knowing that I wanted to run my own business, and I went to university for business administration, specifically in innovation entrepreneurship, as well as sustainable development, thinking like environmental sciences. Like the people who design our cities got my degree and then went on to do urban planning kind of thing. So it's a wide variety. And part of that was because growing up, talking about, oh, what do you want to do with your life? When people are like, oh, you love dogs, you love animals so much, they say, oh, why don't you be a vet? I I hate needles. I'm not someone well suited to work in the medical industry, whether that be human or animals. So that was never open to me. I always knew that I liked teaching. I worked with kids for 10 years before I started working with dogs. Always liked teaching people. I've taught kids, I've taught adults, various different things, and then I've always loved dogs. And I didn't realize that being a dog trainer was an option, like that was a career path. Like obviously it is, but it wasn't something that permeated my consciousness until I got my own big feeling dog, reactive dog, rescue dog, however the idioms, identifiers you want to attach to him. And it was going through the process of multiple vets, multiple trainers, that I ended up needing to just learn a lot. And then thought to myself, hey, if I could help other people that are in my position or were in my position, because obviously I'm a few years removed from that, then that seems like a worthwhile thing to do in life.
That sounds wonderful. It's funny how many people that we talk to in life who went in a certain direction because of a personal experience.
Mhm.
How did you find the shift from working directly with, children and adults to working towards um, helping animals and their owners?
Yeah, so I always say, and it's not something that people think about, but when you're a dog trainer, you have two sets of clients. You have the human and you have the dog. And it was relatable to working with kids, where a lot of the times, obviously, I'd be working directly with the children in a variety of different roles, right? So that would be the equivalent of, say, people who do board and trains, where, you take the dog from the human, do a train for you program, and I hand you back. It's like me saying, yes, I'll teach your 10-year-old math. You hand them to me. I teach them the math. They go back to you, right? For dog training, I would argue it's not that simple. There are some really great trainers doing board and trains and the like out there, but depending on what you're actually working on with the dog, the human needs knowledge as well, because they need to actually be able to apply it in real life, right? It's not as comparable, though I use the metaphor of the math, where, oh, like the kid is going to go on and work independently and continue in school and education and become their own person. For dogs, they're stuck at like a mental capacity of like five-ish, depending. And they're fully your dependent. They're not ever going to grow up and leave your house, right? So you, as the human, are also going to need to be able to help them with their behaviors and their skills.
Hmm. And do you find that a lot of your clients are not aware of the impact that they may have in their dog's growth and maybe the changes that they might need to do as they come in for this kind of training?
Maybe not at the beginning, though that being said, I'm pretty vocal about my thoughts and approach to training. So I think that they'll tend to self-select what service provider they like, because ultimately that's what I am. And so I never get offended if we're not the right match. It's like a therapist, right? Someone could be a perfectly competent therapist, but that doesn't mean that they're a good therapist for you necessarily. And so I just tend to have clients come to me that want the kind of services and methodology that I apply, or even those that don't maybe fully understand the wider implications. After the first month of working together, they're like, wow, I had no idea that this much was involved and that it would help as much as it does, because a lot of people think training exists in a vacuum. They're like, oh, I just need my dog to be able to like come when called or sit, which very valid. But what those are oftentimes is symptoms of like, oh, actually, we need to work on your dog's responsiveness to you in general, relationship building. Maybe your dog needs some lifestyle changes to get some increased exercise. Maybe you're having a hard time because of all the behavior things. You're not making it to the gym, right? And so you think, what does that have to do with dog training? But it's about how realistic it is to actually implement the changes. Because if you didn't need to change anything, then you wouldn't be hiring me or anyone else, right? If you were happy with things staying the same.
That's completely fair. And, you have I think people would think of it as unique business where it's online, it's,
Hmm.
virtual dog training. Can you talk a bit about how that came to be and maybe the key pivots or turning point that brought you to this business format?
Absolutely. I will I'll give a brief overview of the different kinds of dog training because I've
Yeah.
tried them all, which resulted in me doing my business my way. But then that way for viewers when they're watching this, if something else speaks to them, then they know. I didn't start off doing what I'm doing right off the bat. So frequently when you think dog training, you think in person, which very logical to think this. There's a few different ways that can be done. If you're a dog trainer, a lot of times people will come to you for puppy classes, so this or group classes in general, foundational obedience. This is normally when the dog is young. Puppy class, obviously, they're like 4 months, 5 months and younger. Um, and sometimes adolescents, this is under 2 years. So we'll have these kinds of group classes. There are some dog trainers that do board and train, which is I have a boarding facility. You drop off your dog to me, I train them for you, and I hand them back in a month, give or take, depending on what that programming looks like. There's also, again, with the in person of I go into your house and we do private lessons at your house or out in public or something like that. You could come to my studio, it's one-on-one. And within that, there's varieties like walk-in trains and different things like this. But the different methodologies is um, group versus individual, and whether or not you as the dog owner are involved, or if I'm just taking the leash from you and I'm doing it for you with the dog. And as people start to do research after watching this video, there's a lot of back and forth between dog trainers online about what is actually useful. And I would argue that they all have their utility. What people get frustrated with, and what a lot of dog owners come to both me and other dog trainers with that they're being frustrated with, is that they went to do the wrong quote unquote or form of dog training for their situation. So what will happen is they'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to go to this group class," which could be really great fit for somebody else and their dog, but your dog's struggling with reactivity, so maybe the group class is not our first port of call. Do you see what I mean? And it's not their fault. It's like there's a lack of, you don't know what you don't know, right? So you just think, oh, I just need to go
Mhm.
see a trainer. And that's why I made the distinction as well between dog trainer and behavior consultant. And then when you go internationally, there's a whole other scope of terminology that we can use. But that I say all this is that I've done all of these things. I have done the group classes, I've done board and trains, I've done training your dog for you, and I've done teaching you one-on-one in your home. Why I decided to go virtual is because I found that we weren't making as much progress as I would like. All my clients got results, but I knew that we could do this faster if we could communicate more frequently. It is unrealistic for me to live in your house, unfortunately, and every day help you train your dog. The next best thing we could get to that is doing this online, where we still have, similar to if we were doing in-person private training, the weekly calls. And we talk every day via messaging. I use WhatsApp right now. And they think, why is this dog training by WhatsApp? What does that mean? This means things like you're going to video you doing the exercises with your dog. And I can tell you at minute 3:05, Fido looked at that squirrel. And that's what you should have done this instead. And you might say, oh, like, but why can't you do this in person? Anyone with a bit of a science background knows that if you add in more variables, you actually change the equation. It's a different experiment, right? So your hypothesis is no longer valid because you've actually changed what that situation looks like. And so people will say, well, like, don't say it the reactive dogs. Well, like, don't you want them to improve with humans? Because I will say, oh, like, I would never, like, first session, I'm going to show up to their house and we're not going to get anything done. Yes, but that's also like saying, hey, someone needs to ski. I'm going to shove them down a black diamond slope instead of taking them to the bunny hill, right? Or I use video game analogies frequently for those that are that way inclined. You need to level up. Why are you trying to fight the boss battle when you haven't even learned any of the game mechanics yet? So that's what I mean. It doesn't mean that you don't then put them in the situations that they need to practice those new skills. But if they don't have the new skills, they're not going to acquire them. They're not going to learn them because they're not in a learning headspace. And then the dogs over threshold, the humans overwhelmed. Because, of course, by the time they call a dog trainer, and this is what I want to tell folks, and we'll get into these with some of the questions. by the time they call you, especially if they're calling you for like a behavior thing, like I said, separation anxiety, reactivity, dog bites, things like that, they're already stressed out. That no one ever calls you when it's like, oh, this behavior is just starting. Possible, very unlikely. Normally, this is a I'm already burnt out and overwhelmed, and Fido's already bit someone, or it's already been months of my dog tearing up the house, eating something when I was gone, and I had to dog surgery, like getting something out of the dog's stomach. You laugh, these are not extremes, these are real stories of real people. And so when we get into things that people should keep in mind when they're getting into this career is it's almost like triaging. You know, people come to you and you have to figure out where are you at? Are you in the mental headspace to learn? Where's your dog at? And a lot of the times at the beginning, it's management and teaching you the basics and getting you some headspace before we can even begin the behavior modification because no one's in the headspace to learn. Apologies. That was
Mm.
quite the TED Talk and rant.
No, that's great because uh, it may be that, some people might be thinking of getting into dog training, that kind of industry, but we discussed at a previous meeting the work that you need to do with the people as well
Mhm.
as the dogs themselves. And so needing to work a lot with the owner is
Mhm.
a big part of your business.
Mine in particular, yeah. And so just to touch on that, um, Mm, frequently, a lot of dog trainers will tell people if you don't like people, you don't want to be a dog trainer. I would say that's definitely true for behavior consultants. There are exceptions of the trained for you. So, in the case where you're taking the dog from the human, and going to train for them. And you can see that in a lot of the working dog industries. For instance, service dogs, dogs that are for protection work, different things like that. And those are its own level of beast of theoretically you learned similar to how you could be a pet dog trainer, you get certified as a pet dog trainer and then learn to become a behaviorist. You could get the certification of be a dog trainer and then specialize in service dogs, specialize in um, protection work, working dogs, different things like that. Um, why I bring this up is if you know for sure that you like love dog training, love working with dogs, don't like working with people, I wouldn't advise the pet dog route. I would advise some of those other ones. And working in organizations does not mean you won't work with people because they're still the end user. You're still going to need to help transition that, but there are roles in those spaces where it's less communication than, say, mine, where I work with the dog through the human versus,
Hmm.
yeah.
But it's good to know that there's options, right? Because there's different levels and different, we'll call it different topics, right?
Yes,
Like
yeah.
when you get
It's
into,
specializations, yeah.
yeah. So, people can combine their interests
Hmm.
for some of those as well.
It's like
Uh,
your dog trainer is like your GP, like your general practitioner, being a doctor, and then you go to specialists for different things, right? And so as you start getting into looking up all these certifying bodies, you can specialize in service dogs, reactivity, aggression, and there are continuing education credits and programs for each of those things.
oh, that's amazing. That's great that it's all outlined.
Hmm.
So let's uh let's go to your day to day. Can you give us a bit of a look into what a regular work day or work week looks like for you?
Yeah, and so I will preface this. This is just speaking about my business and what uh, I'm going to try and answer this one in two ways. I'm going to try to answer this of what this looks like in my business and then in general what dog trainers do.
Sure.
Right. So for my business, because it is super client focused, my day always has some component of speaking with clients, whether or not that's our weekly calls or sending messages of checking out what videos they've sent me, what questions they've sent me, because it's constant Q&A back and forth, asking if I haven't received a message, oh, like how are we doing? Because people forget different things like that. That's part of the reason why people hire me is the accountability piece to make sure we're making the progress we need to. And the reason why I preface this is, say, if you were doing the group classes or things like that, you might not be talking to the clients every day, right? So that's why the juxtaposition there. Um,
Hmm.
for myself and my business, I have an online presence. So some component of my day is checking social media messages. This is important for going on the entrepreneurship tangent here. And this is the other thing to think about for those who are interested is, do you want to be a business owner or do you just want to be a dog trainer? There's nothing wrong with either, right? There are organizations that you can go work for. That's how I got my start, was first like interning and apprenticing under people and then working, say, for boarding facilities as their in-house dog trainer to do the board and trains and things like this. So the reason why I say this is when you work for yourself, it's like you have two jobs, right? Not only am I the dog trainer, but I'm also the social media and the admin and all of these things versus when you work for a facility, there's like other people that handle all of those kinds of roles. So, the only reason why I'm also prefacing this is a lot of also what I do in my workday is also the business things that, say, somebody who just worked for somebody else wouldn't have to do those components. But uh, Yes, so social media, communicating with clients, a lot of times working on longer term projects. So if I have a day where this is also why it's like every day is a little bit different. It depends
Hmm.
on whether or not I'm working with clients that day or what have you. Some of my day is also spent doing continuing education. So I like to make sure that we need to do so for certifications, but B, this is behavioral science. It is constantly being updated. There's always more things to learn. So if I'm not currently enrolled in a course, I'm reading a book by somebody, an expert on a variety of topics to make sure that I'm continuing to improve my knowledge, just make sure the clients are getting the best version of myself that they possibly can for their dogs. And then I have long-term projects right now. So it'll be things like making a video library of demo videos that I can send out to clients. It will be things like speaking with folks like yourself to either raise awareness for my practice or dog training in general. So some content creation. And then when I have the time, which is always hard to find the time, it's spending time writing some of the books I have hopefully coming out. We'll say next year because I feel like this year might be a bit ambitious with everything I've got going on. But with respect to not just dog training, but dog rearing, because that is one thing I think that the industry, I don't think we have enough of in public consciousness is there's a lot of amazing dog training books out there, but the average dog owner doesn't want to be a dog trainer, which like they don't need to in order to have a dog. But I'd love to see more literature out there of, for lack of a better term, minimal viable product. Like what do you need to do to be able to like know that you've covered your bases with your dog? Because there's also just such a gap there generationally too of how people may have had dogs in the past versus what does it like to be a quote unquote modern dog owner or like a dog owner in the cities, because previously a lot of people didn't have dogs in cities. They were more of a country thing. So there's a lot from a systematic lens.
I think that sounds wonderful because when I got my first dog as an adult, I did get some dog training books and I did some of the stuff, but then I stopped because it was too much for one. So, because there's work, there's, life getting in the way and all these other things. But also, there are certain things I didn't want to train my dog to do because
Hmm.
I wanted my dog to be a dog and not necessarily be trained to a certain level. So I think it's going to be very welcome by a lot of people because, um, you know, dogs should have their quirks, and it's fun to see them just be themselves and have their little personalities without having to look at you every time to see if there's something else that you want them to do.
Absolutely. One of the programs I'm in right now is to become a family dog mediator through Legs, and it's a learning environment. Oh gosh, here I am blanking, but thank goodness I have the book right here. It's by Kim Brophy. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because it does speak to your point of letting a dog be a dog, meeting your dog's needs. What does that look like from your dog as themselves? What does that look like from their species? What does that look like from their breed, even if it's a combination of breeds? Because we have for the modern domesticated dog, we have selected
Mm.
for these different breed traits. So it is tough when people are comparing them to humans because uh, we have not had these, uh, thankfully, breeding programs that we have done for dogs where we have selected for these different breed traits. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because some people will think, oh, well, they're just a dog. But then they will be surprised when their beagle bays or is like super food motivated and constantly knocking over their trash can, or, their sight hound that wants to chase the squirrels and things like that. And again, people don't know what they don't know. So I'm not at all shaming, but that's why, like, I think it's important to know who your dog is and letting them be a dog, but also back to my very earlier point of like, how does that fit within your lifestyle and how can we get that to work together?
Curious question, just on based on what you said, this popped in mind. Do you ever work with people on selecting
Yeah.
before they have a dog on what would work best? You do.
Yeah. It's not a protected term, so don't, I, what I put on my website is canine matchmaker because it's not just puppies. I'll also work with people that want to get a rescue dog. And I'm like,
Great.
okay, great. Let's look at, because I'm a adopt or shop responsibly camp. I'm like, there are good ethical breeders out there. There are good ethical rescues out there. There's also not ethical versions of both of those things, which people don't know because they'll think, oh, rescue. Again, unfortunately, with dogs, a lot of it is really unregulated. And I think that you can find a great dog from either situation. It's just figuring out who you are and what kind of dog would be a good fit for you. And then what can we have available? So I help people through what kind of dog would be good for them, even down to age and things, right? Because some people will think, oh, I'd love a puppy. And I'm like, well, with your lifestyle, actually, you're going to find having a puppy really, really hard. Puppy blues are a thing of, it's not at all comparable, but you know how some people will get postpartum depression. Part of that has to do with the hormones. Part of that has to do with, um, like what life looks like. It is so different. And
Mm.
puppy blues is a very common phenomenon where people will still love their puppy, but they're depressed for a good 6 months. It's really overwhelming. Um, this is a tangent to say, like, you know, with the matchmaking, it's not just a, oh, here's this cute little puppy. It's very much, where are we getting our dog from? What kind of dog? How old? Things like that.
Oh,
The
that's
do
fantastic.
I was just going to add in The Dog House, if that sounds interesting to anybody. It's a show on Channel 4 in the UK, and there's also an Australian version, where basically these rescue shelters, it's filmed. Say you could walk in and describe who you are and what kind of dog you want, and they will match you with dogs that they have in residence. And that is one of my favorite shows and the inspo for that service.
I love that. But it's great to know that it's something that people can also get into, right? Like
Hmm.
you can have a multitude of different services
Yes.
for your business. You mentioned that for people who might work for an organization as opposed to working for themselves, that their days
Hmm.
might look different.
Yes.
Can you walk us through a little bit of what it was like when you were working for someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is why, again, I preface and I'm a little odd where a lot of people, don't get me wrong, a lot of trainers have worked in different areas. I am maybe a little bit unique of the breadth of things that I did before starting my own business. It's not as common. People will typically pick their lane and stay in it. They might try a few different things, but I have a somewhat unique experience where I have tried the board and trains, the group classes, the privates, and working for other organizations while doing that before striking out on my own. So, to that and what a day looks like, I'll walk you through boarding because people will be curious, and that will also maybe explain a little bit why I don't do board and trains anymore. So when I was working in a facility doing board and trains, the important thing to note is these can go one of two ways. For the facilities that I worked for, they were boarding kennels that had add-ons. So I was their, training department. They had groomers, things like that, but they were a doggy, say like daycare and boarding facility first, and then these were add-on services. Why I have this disclaimer is because I also know there are dog trainers that, sorry, spoiler, do like run their own business doing the board and trains, but it's part of their training business. And why I outlined this is because these automatically make what those days look like and what those jobs look like very different. So
Mm.
when I was working for somebody else, we'd have things like say a boarding facility, smaller side, say like 30, 40 dogs are actually like in the facility being boarded. And some of my clients, say they'd be two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight of them, not all of them, right? So you'd have the regular boarding dogs. And then you'd have the training boarding dogs. So, what that actually looked like on a day to day was partly related to what the facility looked like. So, I had one facility I worked for that was a daycare that also did boarding. But they actually set things up different from average, where they didn't just let the dogs run around with each other all day. Anybody who's been looking into the industry for a while knows that doggy daycares as a concept idea can be rather contentious. So back and forth, apologies, I'm jumping between in my brain one experience with one boarding facility versus the other. So with my first one, it was the more traditional where the dogs were all in boarding kennels. They'd be let out in the morning, they'd be let back in, they'd be fed, and there was this kind of set schedule, and they were in groups and they'd be doing all these things together. So as the trainer, part of what I was doing was timing when I was training dogs in conjunction to when other things in the facility were going on. Why that's relevant is if you have a reactive dog that you're working on, taking them by a group of 10, 20 dogs all playing in a group outside as you're getting to the training facility, not a great start to the training lesson, as an example. For the group that did the doggy daycare, but it was a lot more intentional than a lot of other doggy daycares out there, where the dog got intentionally paired for like play dates as opposed to the big groups coming out. That was a lot more flexible for me as the dog trainer, because then I could just come in and say, hey, I need so and so and so and so today. Easy to check to the board, talk to the other staff, see when they had gone out to use the bathroom and different things, see when their last exit was, when they ate last, and then I could kind of plan accordingly. If you're so depending on what kind of organization you're working for, how much uh, the dog meets your schedule versus your schedule needs to meet what's going on in the facility might differ.
Okay, so that's interesting because it could be a bit of a, I mean, like any job, matching a little bit more of how you want to approach your work and,
Hmm.
the levels of obstacles, I guess, in the day to day. Speaking of, can you tell us a little bit about in your let's see maybe your specific situation. What takes up more time than people would expect?
Client communication.
Mm.
Uh, and this is again coming disclaimer of I'm a behavior consultant in addition to the dog trainer. So there's more paperwork than people think
Mm.
because I'm documenting what we've done. I've created a spreadsheet of where I think we're going. I have key progress indicators of when we reach this with the dog, we're ready to move on to this next phase. There's emailing with the clients back and forth, sending them messages, reviewing what they've sent to me, sending responses. So a lot of communication for what I do with my business. When I was working boarding, that was significantly less, in part because a lot of the client communication was taken on by the admin office because they were in charge of booking in general dogs for boarding and things like that. So then I'm an add-on service. So their first port of call is actually somebody else, and then they get put on to me. So this is also something to then be aware of is, as with any job, the bigger organization you work with, the more hurdles or barriers there are in between you and the client, the more miscommunication can happen, which can be both not ideal, but also dangerous in terms of dog training. So you want to make sure if you are going to work for another organization, make sure that they're not going to push you to take on dogs that you're not equipped to deal with. Make sure that what you're telling the client is also being backed up by your like supervisors or other people in the facilities, because we don't want someone promising that, yeah, your dog's going to magically be fixed after a month. in the
Hmm.
boarding facility when that's not what that I would say, as much as I try not to throw dirt on other dog trainers' names or anything like that, anyone who's promising you like this silver bullet, this is all going to be magically fixed within this time frame, take a second look at that, because there's, like I said, there's so many variables involved that to me just feels disingenuous. Even if they have such an amazing success rate, I just don't think we should be telling clients that this will be for sure solved in X time frame.
That makes sense because, with any sentient being, you only have so much control over
Hmm.
change, and, they're little individuals, little living beings themselves, and they have their own minds.
And it also, so it was back to, say, boarding facilities. And one of the reasons, again, why I like to work virtually is dogs don't generalize well. Short thing of what that means. Um, Teaching a dog how to do something in one context doesn't mean that they will automatically do the same thing in another context.
Mm.
So you need to teach them the skill and then generalize that. Say, like, have your dog sitting at doors, right? Front door, office door, car door, sliding door. These are doors, right? But you have to reinforce that skill in all of those different places to say that your dog like really knows that skill. Why is this relevant? Why am I going off on this tangent? Because if you're in a boarding facility, that's not your house. That's not your neighborhood. Does that mean that we can't start the skill process? No, absolutely. We can. It is a process to learn those skills. Does that mean that your dog's going to be able to then automatically do it in your context?
Yeah.
Depends how we hand that off, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Eh, You know, on that line, or maybe it'll be a separate line. What's the hardest part of this career that people don't really realize? And that can be, professional, it can be a personal impact, but working with animals sounds fantastic, as well as with people, but everything has ups and downs.
Yeah, the emotional toll. There is a fantastic program by Handlers and Humans called Person-Centered Dog Training. And who she is a certified therapist, as in like human therapist, but she has a reactive dog. And so she went through the process of getting training her dog using the help of other trainers, different things like that. And what she offers is for dog trainers, here's how you can help your clients, here's how to help the human end of the leash. And that is, keep in mind, so I've told you how important throughout this whole conversation it is working with humans, right? This is not required to get certified to be a dog trainer, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in, it's all up to discretion, right? There's a lot around maybe record keeping and different things like that, but not actually how can we help the human end of these things. And so her course you can take for continuing education credits, but I just found that to be the most helpful thing. And one of the reasons why is she pointed out that dog trainers are kind of like therapists. They're in the, I believe she called it like the helping industry, right? And those industries, you're very prone to burnout because there's a huge emotional toll. Um, because like I said, a lot of people will come to you when they're already at their breaking point with their dog. So there's already that. There's already people coming to you saying, if we don't fix this, my dog's going to the pound. If we don't fix this, this dog's getting put down. Or if this doesn't work, like I'm going to have to move out of my apartment or quit my job. I did both, by the way, with my first dog. And like, so a lot of these stakes are really real. Um, Partner conflict. You wouldn't believe with some cases, it's like my boyfriend's gonna break up with me. You know, I can't have this dog around my kids if they, so it's a lot of really big emotional, real human stuff, which there's a lot of pressure.
Mhm.
And as much as we can tell ourselves, oh, it's not our fault when we fail or when we don't meet the timeline that would work for that human, but maybe is not compatible for that dog, it's really easy to internalize that. And it's really easy to, a lot of us get into this because we love dogs, right? I also got into this because I really care about people. And it is really tough to feel like you've failed both the dog and the human, which won't be your fault, won't even be their fault. A lot of the times these things happen due to compatibility issues, which is one of the reasons why I do matchmaking. Um, but yeah, I think having good tools, therapists have therapists, coaches have coaches. I think there are some really great dog training networking groups. Make sure you don't go into like the toxic ones that are bashing clients because that's not going to be helpful for your mental state. But I totally believe dog trainers should have therapists, need to have coping skills. Uh, Similar to how I said a lot of dog owners, their capacity decreases because they're not going to the gym or hanging out with friends and different things like that could be due to their situation with their dog. Dog trainers, we have the propensity to overwork, to over deliver, to get over invested in the clients. To the point where we will neglect our own relationships, our own dogs, especially those of us who run our own business. So I think talk about skills of who should get into this. If you don't have those personal skills, you need to work on developing them because or else this will consume your life.
Mm-hmm. That's some really good advice because it's really great to be passionate about your work, but it's so easy to just get so involved that you no longer really separate yourself from it.
Mhm. And then dog trainer burnout, super common. And
Hmm.
then you're not helping anybody at that point, right?
Yes, yes. I think it's something that we forget, right? That if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't help anyone else.
Hmm.
Is there a mistake that you made early on in your dog training career that you wish someone had warned you about?
A lot of things, like I said, of it's hard for me to say because on the one hand, if I hadn't had those experiences, as tried as to sound, I like wouldn't be the dog trainer I am today. But I gave all of those warnings because I'm like, okay, actually, instead of having to learn those things the hard way, please just come talk to me and I'll tell you what certifications to actually get, or I'll tell you like who to intern for, or like um, what organizations maybe are a good fit or not. It's one of the reasons why when this goes up, we'll have the option on the website of prospective dog trainers can just book like a quick coffee chat with me, and I'm happy to help them suss out for their situation whether or not this would be a good fit. I think a lot of my mistakes came from assuming that other people had more information than they actually did because I always like to come from the perspective of likely people it's likely like an ignorance thing rather than an unkindness thing just because it's easier to move through life that way. And especially since when I was younger, I'd come into this thinking, oh, well, this person has ran this boarding facility for forever. This person has been offering these group classes or what have you, different things for forever. So clearly they know what they're doing. Um, but there are a lot of people that work in a lot of different areas of the industry that either don't have the certifications or don't have the people skills or haven't worked in other areas of the dog industry. So just because someone is an excellent groomer or an excellent boarder doesn't mean they actually know how to train dogs.
Mhm.
Um, so I think a lot of it was I should have stood up more for myself and then consequently the dogs. But coming into working in somebody else's business, especially when I was younger, I had a hard time telling them, hey, like this program probably isn't the right thing.
It
Especially if they've
makes
worked
sense.
with the dog trainers in the past and they're like, well, this is how so and so did it. And I'm like, I appreciate that. I just don't think that's the right thing. And then you never want to criticize someone else, right?
Hmm. It's touchy, right? And it's part of some growing pains for sure, and getting your footing. And along the same lines, is there a setback that you experienced that felt like a failure, but you later realized was actually helping you?
Yeah. So big one, and this being actually somewhat recently, was I had made the decision to go from doing a bunch of in-person things to things being virtual. And I've been doing things virtually for a while now. Um, but you have that learning curve of people don't know what a dog trainer is, let alone what a virtual dog trainer is. How are you going to train my dog online? And I think that part of what I struggled with initially, and I'm still kind of working through now, is there's more education that you need to have, that you need to give when selling one service. So it's a fine line because a lot of times people won't necessarily know what you do or know what they're going to get out of working with you. Um, so it is a combination of meeting people where they're at and also educating them on the possibilities. Similarly to that, I came up against this idea of, okay, how do I actually want to run my business? Which is really funny coming from somebody from an entrepreneurship or like business background of, oh, I went down the dog training rabbit hole and then needing to relearn of, no, but part of the reason why you wanted to work for yourself was to make sure that you could set your business up in a way that suited your own life. And it's funny because these are things that the more wise and experienced dog trainers warn you about at the beginning of your career. And sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you needed to make those mistakes to get to where you are. And part of the conclusion I came to was that one of the reasons why I set things up the way that I did is because I really want people to make a lot of progress very quickly. And I want them to learn the things and set up their life in a way that's going to be sustainable long term. So my goal is that you won't need to rehire me. This sounds kind of trite, but a lot of my clients work with me between 3 and 6 months, depending on what they're working on. What will happen is they'll come to me for one thing, and then we'll tackle that, and they'll realize, oh, actually, this was related to a bunch of other things. Uh, Back to the point of you can't go into your calls saying all of those things because or else people will be like, whoa, that's too much work. So a lot of your job as the dog trainer is to hold 90% of what's going on in your head and then deliver the 10% to the client while
Mhm.
guiding them towards where we need to be going. Because to your point, uh, they don't want to become dog trainers or else they would not have hired you. So therefore, you need to frame in a way that will help clients like yourself not be overwhelmed by the book and actually, take what is helpful and leave what isn't. That's on the dog trainer's end to do. Sorry, this was a roundabout way. If folks couldn't tell, I have ADHD, and so these make logical sense of where I'm going in my brain, but maybe not to the average listener. Um, but what I realized was one of the reasons why I set my business up the way it was I want to work with a select number of clients. And this is very interesting from a dog training perspective because a lot of people will brag, oh, this year I worked with hundreds of clients. I worked with thousands of clients. And I'm like, do you remember everybody's name? Like how did you do that? And I'm like, oh, maybe with group classes this makes sense. And this is not me bashing on anyone else's methodology, but I'm like, I'll be out and see a book and I'm like, this would be really helpful for so and so, or like I come across a video, or the people live in my head, the people and the dogs, and I've set it up that way because I want to help them move as quickly as possible. And I think the more clients I had living in my brain, the less helpful I was going to be. I shouldn't have to refer to this list to look back and be like, oh, who is this person again? And so that was what I was going through of this next iteration of my business is making sure that I'm working with a number of clients where I'm actually still serving the end goals while also meeting my financial needs. So this was kind of a businessy rant, but yeah,
No, it's an important one, right? Because striking that balance is important. People need to live. So being able to do that is really important. So navigating, trying things and seeing what can fit and how you can do that is really good. And, being able to do it virtually, I'm sure is something that hasn't occurred to many people. Um, but you're doing it, it's possible. And, now you have a little bit more of a playbook. So it's something that people can learn from.
it is. And there are a couple of my previous mentors that do, I wouldn't say they don't do exactly what I do. They do the virtual component, but just the text based without the video calls. So there's different people doing this in different ways depending on what they do. I probably tend to over deliver. People look at me and look at my prices who know anything what I'm doing. They're like, you should be charging double for what you do. And I'm like, yeah, but also, have we seen the economy? And I want to make sure that people can afford. So this is also the balance. And back to the helping burnout is how much your services are actually worth versus how much people can afford to do.
Yeah.
This tugs on the heartstrings a lot for the people. It's like, oh, that's why a good balance is to offer some free resources, whether or not that be through like a podcast or a downloadable
Mhm.
PDF on your website or different things like that, because you will run up into the if you make things so affordable, you won't be able to live, or you're working like 80 hours a week, or if you're charging so high, then people can't access. So I think part of it is people need to really sit with themselves of like what their values are when they're starting their business. And again, you can avoid all this by not starting your own business, but you might end up working for an organization that has a mismatched values. So I think it's still important to reflect before you opt into whatever methodology.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's something that people might have to learn for themselves.
Yeah, try and
Uh, yeah.
Goldilocks, you know?
Yeah, try things and see what works for you, and especially when you're starting out, right? Like it's a good time to dip your feet in like you did. As you were moving up in your career, now looking back, what skill or skills did you find it generally takes longer to learn or practice in your field?
Mm, it's going to be people skills, communication with respect to jargon. And if any
Okay.
dog trainer here is listening to this, they'll be like, yeah, absolutely. So, what it is especially going back to the behavior consulting, there are technical terms for these things, right? There are, um, in many fields, there are technical jargon, right? The average pet owner might not know what those things are. So it's remembering to translate that in a way that people will understand, and also recognizing that your clients might just never understand certain concepts and they actually don't need to. Your time is better spent telling them what it is that they need to do and answering their questions and delivering it in a way that works for them. For some clients, they might not ever be able to get that end result that they're wanting because they due to um, who who they are and how they approach things or what their life looks like, they just might never be able to adopt the practices needed to get to that 100%. But also, they might actually be happy with 70%. So when you deliver 80%, you just need to be like, ignore that 20%, or not ignore,
Hmm.
but you know what I mean? Like the perfectionism, those of us that have that tendency, I think can get in our way. Um, so a few different things. First is going to be not using technical jargon and explaining things in a way that makes sense to non-professionals. Second thing is going to be knowing what the client actually wants. Because if your client doesn't want their dog to walk and heel, why are you wasting your time teaching them to walk and heel? Um, and so this is so, and this will be contentious because there are some dog trainers out there that will say like, oh, if you're not having your dog walking and heel, you're not doing the right way. I am maybe come from a non-judgmental approach where very much so I like to assess, is it a safety issue? What does the client actually want? And then we're going to do that. Because if that dog is never going to be off leash, they don't necessarily need recall. Could it be fun? And if the client's willing to do it and we can go through it, great. But why are we prescribing how other people should be living their life with their dog?
That's very refreshing.
Like I said,
Uh,
I'm odd. Like if this ever blows up, I'm sure there's going to be so many things. The only reason why I keep disclaiming this is Instagram for dog trainers can be a very contentious place, and it's not normally the dog people, it's other dog trainers that will go in on each other.
well, and let's talk about the industry. How would you describe the culture in general?
Okay, yeah, so this is going to be a big one. So without getting into huge amounts of detail, um, one thing to note that it is a largely unregulated industry. So there are certifying bodies, but being a dog trainer or even like a behaviorist, a behavior consultant isn't necessarily a protected term, at least in Canada, where I am, as far as I know, the US. In the UK, behaviorist is something you can go to school for and get your degree in. So this is again, it depends on who you're working with and where you are in the world. But in general, it's not a protected term, which means that you could decide tomorrow to call yourself a dog trainer, print out business cards, and just walk around down the street being like, hey, I'm a dog trainer. Which is really confusing for clients because why would you not believe that this person is a dog trainer, right? And I'm not even saying that one necessarily needs to be certified to be good at what you do, but it allows you that extra layer of security as a client and even as a dog trainer that you've been peer reviewed, that other people have said, yeah, you have enough of this technical and practical knowledge to be able to work with clients in this way, because or else you don't know whether or not you're actually doing the right things or having the most up-to-date scientific knowledge and this, that, and the other thing. So that will be one thing about the industry is there are absolutely certifications. I think we're going to link some of the international ones in this blurb on the website later, or I'll have a blog on mine. But it is not mandatory to do that before becoming a dog trainer. So it's kind of a buyer beware. As such, there are a lot of people that will be distrustful of dog trainers because they worked with others that didn't work. And some of that has to do with maybe the clients, but some of that has to do with maybe they saw people that didn't know what they were doing or maybe shouldn't have taken on that client. Um, there's different methodologies. So a lot of these certifying bodies operate under a force-free or positive reinforcement method. Um, there are other trainers that do other methodologies of dog training. These could be called sometimes balance trainers or compulsion-based trainers. Again, this is something where, like, if a dog trainer was commenting under this, I'm sure I'd get roasted. One of the things to note is that, as far as I'm aware of, there are not any international certifying bodies for such methodology. So this is also what adds into that kind of divide, is there are, say, programs you can take to learn to do these different things, e-collar training being a really big one, but there is not it's not an accepted practice by the CPDT or the IAABC, different acronyms for different certifying international bodies of dog trainers. Um, so this adds to a lot of contention, and this is something to be aware of as a dog trainer is especially if you are opening your independent practice, which the vast majority of dog trainers are. A lot of us are solo practitioners. There's a lot of competition, and not even like the idea of competition being, free market, we're having fun, we're having a good time. It can be quite cutthroat. There are a lot of dog trainers that can be really hateful towards others online, particularly if they use a different kind of methodology. So that's the other thing to keep in mind is, do you have a thick skin? Do you want a social media presence? If
Mm.
you were a local dog trainer, maybe you don't need to be. I'm not saying don't put yourself online. You know what I mean? Like I'm more out there than the average because I also work entirely online. I work remote, so this is how I get clients. But if I was working in person locally, I would be way more inclined to tell people maybe we put some like posters up. We work with other businesses and get referrals just because sometimes it can be really contentious, and do not be surprised. It's unfortunate, but there will be dog trainers out there that will just not like you because of the way that you train, because they don't like your face, because you're competition for them in their local area. Recently, I reached out to a bunch of rescues just to be like, hey, I offer free consults. Could this be helpful for your clients? Didn't say anything about dog training on their website. I had some really nasty responses back from some organizations being like, we actually have behaviorists on our staff, and, just making comments about like, how can you train dogs virtually and things like that? So I assume ignorance, obviously, first rather than callousness, because that's just easier to expect out of people.
Mhm.
Um, but this is just to say, even if you go with an offer of free help, there are people that will just be not super happy about that. Just so people know, because most people that aren't in the dog training industry don't know how cutthroat it can be. So if that is not an environment that you're willing to put yourself in, very understandable. But then again, that leads into maybe it would be better working for somebody else, or maybe you don't want to have as much of an online presence.
It's good to know because, you know, you don't want to get surprised.
Exactly.
And then you can decide as well, like, do I want to deal with it or not deal with it? There's different avenues you can take. You don't have to skip out completely, you just take a different direction.
Yeah. Same as any job, right?
Same as any job. And, you know, given the circumstances in which we are now, let's build on that. Can you discuss a little bit about the power dynamics that women entering this field should be prepared for?
And again, this is such an interesting one because the industry is so widespread. I will say a lot of our famous examples in the general public, not saying those of us in the industry, but what a lot of people will know, and I'm not going to name names, I'm so sorry, just because I do not want to invite a flood of hate into my inbox. Um, a lot of the famous ones are male. Some of these ones don't have the certifications, but they are very big either online or reality TV or different things like that. That being said, it is more so of a women dominated industry, not in terms of necessarily who is on top, depending on what on top means, but in terms of sheer number. Very similar to teaching professions, right? Caregiving professions. A lot of these are just tend to be, rightly or wrongly, a lot of women in those fields. But as well, if you start looking into those organizations, not always, but there are a lot of times the people in power at the top will be male. So that's something to keep in mind. That being said, going through certifying bodies, depending which one you go through, a lot of your instructors will be women. There are just a lot. Another thing to note, though, is, and again, I'm very aware that I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I live in Canada, so this is a very North American perspective. I'm sure there will be somebody from Europe or Asia or where have you that chime in and say, oh, this isn't like that on my continent. I invite people too because I'd like to know. Um, but here it is very much so lacking in diversity, at least
Mm.
from what you can see in a lot of the certifying bodies, what you can see in a lot of the educational institutions, for what I've even seen out of popular people online. There just tend to be a lot of white women in those positions. I'm not going to say that, they aren't good at what they're doing, but that is something to be aware of. I'm obviously, for those watching and not just listening with the headphones, I am a white woman myself. So I cannot speak to the experience of, is there some gatekeeping? Is this toxicity about the community? But like I said previously, there are just even toxicity around methodology. So I would not be surprised if there was some institutes of racism or gatekeeping within that as well. I can only speak to what I like see, not necessarily what I know.
No, that makes sense. It's good to have some awareness of it, and hopefully there's change coming, and things will grow. But based on what you see and you experience, where do you see yourself in this field in 5 to 10 years?
Ooh, I would say this is a really being completely honest, this is a difficult industry to be in right now, just due to what things look like globally. This is not necessarily politically related, but politics do play a large amount into how much disposable income people have. And we have seen traditionally in recession times, people will cut costs. And unfortunately, while I don't view it this way. Dog training is something that the end consumer views a lot of times as a luxury. So they might continue to send their dog to daycare or go get grooming or different things like that. And this, again, this is important for dog trainers to know because that's strictly related to the human, right? Then the human uh, can put their dog somewhere. The human can get their dog groomed. They don't need to do it. But for dog training, uh, a lot of times that is something that will get skipped. So partly what I think the industry will look like 5 to 10 years from now, it continues to be impacted by what do things look globally a few years from now. We've seen some great strides in terms of certification bodies. Like I said, the person-centered dog training, that is only a recent development, even with getting continuing education credits and different things like that. Same thing with legs, taking on that more perspective of dog training from a dog welfare perspective and what does it mean to be a dog rather than just turning our dogs into robots. So there have been some great strides. I'm hoping that that will continue to happen. It will be really interesting, like I said, because on the one hand, you do have the tightening of the belts financially. On the other hand, a lot of times in our post-COVID world, more people than ever have dogs. A lot of the younger generations aren't having children, but they're having dogs. So also the companion animal population is growing, at least in our portion of the world right now. So what that looks like, how that shakes out, I'm a bit uncertain. I think continued education, but I think that we might see some more anti-dog rhetoric just because of the mismatch of uh, people being able to take care of their dogs or understanding what that is versus the amount of people owning dogs. I think just as any population size increase, you just start to notice the even the small population of outliers not doing the right thing, you know?
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see how well, I mean, for people who are keep themselves in the know, current
Mm.
events and whatnot, the ripple effects and impacts that it has throughout, and it's definitely something to keep in mind. And the different ways that you can go about it to see how you can still take that on.
It's something to keep in mind for people who are just getting into the industry is
Yes.
the for multiple reasons, maybe it's worthwhile to work for somebody for a while. You need to anyway to get the experience hours and things like that. But even for more financial stability, at least the business is taking on the risk rather than yourself. So that also might be a maybe you write it out, work for the companies because sometimes some companies say with service dogs will do the in-house certification or pay for training. So just
Mm.
so different things to think about. Unfortunately, dog training education is not like going to university. There's no, at least where we are, there's no like student loans. It's like you've got to pay for the whole thing yourself.
Okay, well, that's very good to know because if you can get into a spot like that, or if you're so inclined, that would be a very good way in these times
Hmm.
uh, to get things done that you really would want to, right? In these kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, protect yourself financially, get the
Yeah.
experience, don't take on the risk, you know.
Mm-hmm. What do you wish that you believed about yourself earlier in your career when you look back now?
I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, I think, is just
Oh.
really real for people in general. And in addition to the dog industry, I think it's also really easy to compare yourself to people who've been doing this for 40 years,
Mm.
right? And while maybe that person does have superior technical technique to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not able to help people. You just need to be an expert insofar as knowing more than the person that you're helping. You don't need to have 50 years experience or 10 years experience before you can call yourself, a competent dog trainer. Um, and I think that especially as you're going through school, right, or interning for other people, not that anyone ever said negative things to me, but you're constantly looking up to people, right? Um, I think it really took me speaking to other dog owners that weren't in the industry for me to realize, oh no, I actually do know what I'm doing. But it took me a while to get there.
That's nice though, to look back and to see that you've gotten past it, that you can, work actively at it. Like we're not stuck in the imposter syndrome zone.
Mm.
You can get out. What is your favorite, absolute favorite part of your job?
Uh, I getting messages from clients when their dog has the aha moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, th those are always really cool. Sometimes they're on video. I had someone send me a video of their dog doing a sit stay as they walked away from their dog. Um, this is one of my clients in Europe, and this was so cool because they hired me because it was really hard to take their dog for walks because they were so excited by other dogs that they would just constantly lunge, not in the reactive or aggressive way, but purely in the I'm so excited, I want to be your friend kind of way. And so most people think, oh, like, that's not a problem. But, when you have a ridgeback that is quite strong and pulling you around everywhere, that was challenging. So to have a video of them in the city with their dog in a sit stay when they didn't even think that they could walk their dog in the city. They stuck to their kind of suburban walks. That was really cool.
I love that. It's such a heartwarming story. You getting to see that on video. That's
Hmm.
wonderful. Okay, I want to thank you so much for joining me today and providing all this wonderful information, all this advice. Very helpful. I mean, very informational for me, very helpful for people watching and hearing this. But before I let you go, I'm going to give you the floor for more advice. Uh, if could just provide some advice for someone who's just starting out or, thinking about getting in this field.
Yeah. Okay. And keep in mind, I'm someone that really values kindness, and I don't like to work with people who are unkind. So take that from this perspective as I give this advice. What if you're looking to intern for people? Listen to how they talk about other dog trainers and listen how they talk about their clients. I am part of the reason why my methods are the way that they are is because I believe in meeting clients where they're at. And after listening to some dog trainers say about how complaining about how the clients aren't doing their homework between sessions and they've, not made that progress, I always like to ask why. And within the group class setting, obviously it's very difficult then to offer that one-on-one additional support. It's why I do the training the way that I do. But I just think that, especially since the industry can be so, for lack of a better term, toxic, I think that you want to learn from somebody who has the best interest of dogs and other people in mind. So if you're working for someone who's talking down about their clients, if you're working for someone who's talking down about other dog trainers, it's like that time could be spent helping those people or improving your own skills. I'm not about toxic positivity, but just watch how much they're complaining about other people.
Thank you so much, Kay.